My dear friends, there is something profoundly powerful about a woman who has healed. A woman who has walked through the fire of pain, betrayal, and disappointment, but emerged not bitter, but better. She doesn't roar to prove her power. Her calm is her strength. Her peace is her protest. And her growth is her revolution. A healed woman doesn't seek revenge. She seeks restoration. She doesn't chase validation. She radiates it. Her energy changes the room she walks into because her heart no longer carries the weight of the past. Her smile is no longer a mask. It is a message that says, I have been broken, but I refuse to stay shattered. Healing doesn't mean forgetting the hurt. It means remembering it without allowing it to control you. When a woman heals, she breaks a cycle, sometimes a generational one. Her children learn peace instead of pain. Her relationships grow in authenticity. Her dreams return stronger than before. A healed woman is not a quiet presence. She is a silent revolution. She teaches others what resilience truly means. Not through speeches, but through her existence. Because when a woman heals, she doesn't just save herself, she heals the world around her. Healing transforms pain into power, but that transformation does not happen overnight. It is a journey that begins in silence. When a woman finally decides she is tired of carrying wounds that no longer serve her. Pain can make her feel small, invisible, or unworthy, but healing teaches her that every hurt was actually shaping her strength. Each heartbreak, each disappointment, and each betrayal becomes a lesson, not a label. She learns that the pain she endured was not meant to destroy her. It was meant to awaken her. She starts to see her scars not as reminders of suffering, but as symbols of survival. Her story changes from, "Why did this happen to me?" to, "What is this trying to teach me?" That shift is the moment power begins to return to her hands. At first, the process of healing can feel heavy. It demands honesty, the kind that forces her to look at the parts of herself she once tried to hide. It asks her to sit with her emotions, not escape them. There are days she cries without knowing why, days when she feels like she's moving backward instead of forward. But even on those days, something inside her is changing. The act of feeling, of acknowledging her pain, is what gives it permission to leave. Healing is not a straight line. It's a dance of breaking and rebuilding. And with every step, she learns to turn her pain into wisdom, her sorrow into empathy, and her wounds into wings. When a woman begins to heal, her perception of strength transforms. She no longer associates strength with endurance or silence. Strength to her becomes the ability to speak truthfully, to set boundaries, to say no. When her spirit says no, it's the courage to rest instead of running from herself. She no longer needs to pretend she is fine just to make others comfortable. Her strength becomes quiet but unshakable, like the roots of a tree that have weathered many storms. It doesn't need to be seen to be real. It exists in her resilience, her grace, and her gentle determination to keep growing no matter what has tried to stop her. Through healing, she also discovers purpose in her pain. What once made her feel broken now becomes the bridge that connects her to others. She realizes that her experiences were never wasted. They were refining her character, sharpening her intuition, and preparing her to help others rise. The pain that once isolated her now becomes the reason she can empathize deeply. She becomes a living example of transformation, assuring others that healing is not just possible, it is powerful. She turns her story into a message, her wounds into wisdom, and her endurance into encouragement for those who have lost hope. Eventually, the woman who once doubted her worth begins to see herself differently. She walks taller, speaks softer, and glows brighter, not because life has become easier, but because she has become stronger. Her power is not loud or forceful, it is grounded and radiant. She knows that her peace was earned, her confidence was built, and her heart was healed through every painful step she once wished she could skip. She carries herself not as a victim of her past, but as the author of her future. Her transformation is the proof that pain, when faced with love and patience, becomes the foundation of power. Healing doesn't just change her, it liberates her. Peace becomes her protest when a woman finally understands that not every battle deserves her presence. Once upon a time, she may have felt the need to defend herself, to prove her worth, to shout over the noise of judgment and misunderstanding. But healing teaches her something profound, that true strength is not always found in resistance. Sometimes it is found in release. When she chooses peace, she is not surrendering. She is mastering herself. The world may mistake her calm for weakness, but she knows that calm is the highest form of control. She no longer reacts to chaos because she has learned to recognize the difference between what needs her energy and what needs her silence. In her past, every insult may have felt personal. Every disagreement may have felt like a wound. But now, peace becomes her armor. She realizes that people act from their own pain, their own fears, and their own insecurities. She doesn't absorb those projections anymore. She lets go of the need to explain herself to those committed to misunderstanding her. She doesn't argue to be right. She lives in a way that makes her truth undeniable. Her silence, her grace, and her grounded presence begin to speak louder than any words ever could. Choosing peace doesn't mean she doesn't feel anger or disappointment. It means she feels them deeply, but doesn't allow them to rule her. She acknowledges her emotions, honors them, and then releases them without letting them poison her heart. Her peace becomes her protest because in a world that expects noise, chaos, and reaction, her calm becomes an act of rebellion. She refuses to let anyone disturb serenity she has worked so hard to create. Her peace says, "I will not let your storm drown my stillness." That is power. There is something divine about a woman who no longer lets conflict consume her. She doesn't chase closure, she creates it. She doesn't beg for understanding, she embodies it. The peace within her becomes a quiet revolution, a statement that she has healed from the need to be seen or heard by everyone. She knows that validation is fleeting, but inner stillness is eternal. Her peace teaches others a lesson without her having to say a word. It becomes contagious. Her family, friends, and even strangers begin to mirror her calm. She becomes a living reminder that peace is not found in perfect circumstances. It is cultivated in the midst of imperfection. In this journey, she learns that peace is a daily choice. It requires discipline. It means waking up and deciding not to let the world's noise dictate her mood. It means responding with patience when provoked, breathing deeply when anger rises, and walking away when her soul demands protection. She understands that peace does not make her passive, it makes her powerful. Because peace is not the absence of conflict, it's the ability to stay centered within it. And when she reaches that level of mastery, nothing external can shake her internal balance. Her peace confuses those who once controlled her through chaos. It frustrates those who expected her to crumble under pressure. But she smiles gently because she no longer needs to fight. Her calm is her victory. Every time she chooses peace over reaction, she reclaims a piece of herself that was once lost to pain. She becomes a reflection of grace in motion, a living testimony that healing doesn't always roar. It sometimes simply breathes, pauses, and remains still. In that stillness, she finds her freedom. Her peace becomes the most powerful protest there is, a declaration that she has risen above what tried to break her. And she will never let it disturb her again. Forgiveness is not a word she takes lightly. It is a journey that tests every corner of her soul. When a woman begins to heal, she realizes that holding on to anger is like gripping a burning coal. It only hurts the one who refuses to let go. For a long time, she might have believed that forgiveness means accepting what was done to her, pretending that the pain never happened. But healing teaches her otherwise. Forgiveness is not approval. It's release. It is the moment she stops allowing the past to dictate her peace. It's the day she decides she no longer wants her happiness to depend on an apology that may never come. At first, forgiveness feels impossible. How can she forgive those who broke her trust, who turned her kindness into weakness, who walked away when she needed them the most? But as she grows, she begins to see that forgiveness isn't about them. It's about her. It is about freeing herself from the invisible chains that bind her to bitterness. Every time she replays the pain in her mind, she relives it. Every time she resents, she reopens the wound. The realization hits her quietly one day: she has suffered enough. Carrying resentment doesn't punish those who hurt her. It punishes her heart. And so slowly, she begins the sacred act of letting go. Forgiveness doesn't happen overnight. It is not a single act, but a series of choices. A conscious decision she makes again and again. Some days, she feels light and liberated. Other days, old memories resurface and test her resolve. But she no longer runs from those memories. Instead, she breathes through them. She understands that forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering without being consumed. It means looking back and saying, yes, that hurt me, but it no longer defines me. Her heart, once heavy with anger, begins to feel lighter, and with every act of forgiveness, her soul breathes a little more freely. As she continues to heal, she learns that forgiveness also extends inward. She forgives herself for staying too long in places where she was not valued, for trusting people who didn't deserve it, for silencing her voice when she should have spoken up. The self-blame she once carried starts to fade as she understands that she did the best she could with the awareness she had. She begins to see her younger self with compassion, not criticism. The harsh inner voice that once echoed in her mind softens into one of gentleness. Forgiving herself becomes one of the most powerful acts of love she will ever perform. Forgiveness transforms her from a prisoner of the past into the author of her present. It allows her to reclaim her energy, her laughter, and her peace. She no longer allows pain to dictate her choices or bitterness to color her future. Instead of seeking revenge, she seeks understanding. Instead of wishing harm, she wishes healing, even for those who hurt her. That doesn't mean she lets everyone back into her life. It means she releases them from her heart's grip. She blesses them silently and moves forward gracefully. There is a quiet kind of power in forgiveness. It's not loud or dramatic. It's gentle, patient, and deeply freeing. The healed woman knows that forgiveness does not erase what happened, but it erases the control it once had over her spirit. It takes immense strength to look at the person who caused you pain and feel nothing but peace. That is not weakness, that is victory. Through forgiveness, she reclaims her life, her energy, and her joy. And though the world may never know the battles she fought within, her calm presence tells the story of a woman who refused to stay captive to her past. She chose freedom, and in that choice, she found herself again. She learns to love herself without apology, and that becomes one of the most profound steps in her healing journey. For years, she may have poured her love into others, giving and giving until there was nothing left for herself. She might have mistaken selflessness for worth, believing that being needed was the same as being loved. But as she begins to heal, she discovers that the most important relationship she will ever have is with herself. She starts to see her reflection differently, not as someone who needs fixing, but as someone who deserves nurturing. She realizes that loving herself is not arrogance. It is acceptance. It is saying, I am enough as I am, and meaning it with her whole heart. This self-love doesn't arrive with loud declarations or sudden confidence. It begins quietly, in small moments. The morning she chooses to rest instead of pushing herself beyond exhaustion. The afternoon she says no to something that drains her energy. The night she forgives herself for not having all the answers. She learns to speak to herself with the same kindness she once reserved for others. The inner critic that once judged her every move begins to lose its power. In its place, a gentle voice emerges, one that says, "You're doing your best, and that's enough." That voice becomes her guiding light. As she grows, she stops measuring her worth through the eyes of others. She no longer seeks validation from the people who never saw her true value. She understands now that external approval is temporary, but self-respect is lasting. She doesn't need to prove her beauty, her intelligence, or her strength. She simply embodies it. When she looks in the mirror, she no longer focuses on what she lacks. She celebrates what she carries. Her flaws become features of her story, not evidence of imperfection. Her scars become proof that she has survived, learned, and evolved. Self-love also teaches her boundaries. She learns that saying no does not make her unkind, and walking away from what hurts does not make her selfish. She realizes that protecting her peace is an act of love, not defiance. She no longer allows guilt to manipulate her decisions. Her heart becomes softer, but her spirit becomes stronger. She starts choosing environments that nurture her growth instead of stifling it. She stops chasing people who make her feel small and starts surrounding herself with those who remind her of her light. There is a quiet transformation that happens when a woman begins to love herself. Her posture changes, her laughter deepens, and her presence becomes magnetic. She doesn't demand attention. She commands it simply by being authentically herself. People begin to notice her confidence, not the kind that boasts, but the kind that glows. Her happiness no longer depends on external circumstances because she has learned to create joy from within. Even when life throws challenges her way, she doesn't crumble easily. Her love for herself becomes the foundation that keeps her grounded. Loving herself also means forgiving herself for her past, for the mistakes, the wrong turns, and the moments of weakness. She no longer carries shame for being human. Instead, she treats her past with compassion, seeing it as a teacher, not a tormentor. Each chapter, no matter how painful, contributed to the woman she is today. Her self-love becomes unconditional, not based on her success, her appearance, or her achievements, but on her existence. She learns that she doesn't need to earn her worth. She was worthy all along. And so she begins to live differently. She dresses for herself, dreams for herself, and grows for herself. Her love radiates in everything she does, how she speaks, how she carries herself, how she treats others. She has learned that the relationship she builds with herself sets the tone for every other connection in her life. When she loves herself without apology, she becomes unstoppable, unshakable, and undeniably free. Boundaries become sacred when a woman truly begins to heal. For too long, she may have confused kindness with compliance, thinking that saying yes to everyone was the only way to be loved or accepted. She might have stretched herself thin trying to keep peace, trying to please, trying to be everything for everyone except herself. But healing teaches her something powerful, that love without limits can lead to exhaustion, and compassion without boundaries becomes self-destruction. She begins to understand that not everyone deserves access to her energy, her time, or her heart. And this realization changes everything. Setting boundaries isn't easy for her at first. She has spent years being the one who gives in, who forgives too quickly, who stays quiet to avoid conflict. So when she begins to say no, it feels uncomfortable. Guilt creeps in, whispering that she is being selfish or cold. But as she grows stronger, she learns that saying no is not rejection, it's protection. It's not a wall to keep people out. It's a gate that filters who gets to come in. She starts to realize that she can love deeply and still protect her peace. In fact, healthy love requires it. Every time she enforces a boundary, she reclaims a piece of herself that she once gave away too easily. When someone crosses a line and she calmly says, "That's not okay," she is not being rude. She is being respectful to herself. She understands now that peace cannot coexist with people who constantly drain her spirit. Her energy is precious, and she chooses to invest it in places that nourish her instead of deplete her. She no longer tolerates emotional chaos disguised as love, manipulation disguised as care, or disrespect disguised as honesty. She sees things clearly now, and that clarity gives her power. Boundaries also teach her balance. She no longer feels the need to explain every choice or justify every decision. She realizes that people who truly value her won't be offended by her limits. They will honor them. The right people don't get threatened by her self-respect. They feel safe around it. And those who resist or criticize her boundaries only reveal their intentions. Through this awareness, she begins to create space in her life for peace, authenticity, and genuine connection. Her relationships start to shift. Some fall away naturally, while others grow stronger because they are rooted in mutual respect rather than dependency. There is a sacred power in a woman who can calmly say, "This is enough," and mean it. She no longer feels the need to explain herself or seek permission to protect her energy. She has learned that silence can be stronger than arguments, and distance can be healthier than constant confrontation. Her boundaries are not about controlling others. They are about honoring herself. They remind her that she deserves the same love and respect she gives so freely to others. In her healed state, boundaries become a form of self-love. They are the invisible lines that keep her aligned with her values, her peace, and her growth. Every boundary she sets becomes a declaration of worth. She is no longer driven by fear of losing people. She is guided by the desire to not lose herself again. And the beauty of this transformation is that it doesn't make her harder. It makes her softer in the right places and stronger in the right ways. She no longer feels guilty for protecting her space because she knows peace is not something you stumble upon. It's something you create. And boundaries are the sacred walls that guard it. She embraces vulnerability as a form of courage, not weakness. For so long, she may have believed that being strong meant staying silent, that tears were a sign of fragility, and that showing emotion would make others see her as less capable. She built walls around her heart, not because she wanted to shut people out, but because she was afraid of being hurt again. She smiled when she was breaking, carried others while she was crumbling, and pretended everything was fine when her soul was tired. But as she heals, she learns that vulnerability is not the opposite of strength. It is its purest expression. It takes immense bravery to be honest about your pain in a world that celebrates perfection. When she allows herself to be vulnerable, something magical happens. The weight she has carried for years begins to lift. She stops performing and starts living. She stops trying to be the woman who has it all together and allows herself to be the woman who is learning, growing, and healing. She understands now that admitting, "I'm not okay," doesn't make her weak, it makes her human. She no longer sees vulnerability as a crack in her armor, but as the doorway through which authenticity and healing enter. It's in those moments of openness that she discovers who truly cares and who only stayed for her strength. Through her healing, she realizes that vulnerability connects her with others in a way perfection never could. When she shares her story, not the polished version, but the raw truth, she gives others permission to be honest about their own pain. Her tears become a bridge, not a barrier. She begins to see that everyone carries their own unseen battles, and by being open about hers, she creates space for compassion and understanding. Her vulnerability becomes an invitation for others to heal too. It doesn't push people away, it draws the right ones closer. Vulnerability also teaches her self-acceptance. She no longer feels ashamed of her sensitivity, her emotions, or her depth. The parts of herself she once tried to hide become the parts she now honors. She realizes that her softness is not a flaw, it's her superpower. It allows her to feel deeply, to connect genuinely, and to love fearlessly. She stops apologizing for being emotional or intuitive. Instead, she embraces those traits as gifts that make her uniquely her. The more she accepts herself, the less approval she needs from the world. There is also a quiet power in her vulnerability with herself. She no longer runs from her emotions or suppresses them with distractions. She faces them, sits with them, and learns from them. When sadness visits, she welcomes it as a teacher. When anger rises, she listens to what it's trying to reveal. When joy arrives, she embraces it fully, without guilt or hesitation. This honest relationship with her emotions helps her live with more balance and clarity. She becomes more aware of what nourishes her and what drains her, what aligns with her truth and what doesn't. The woman who once thought she needed to be unbreakable now understands that real strength comes from being open, not from being closed. The vulnerability gives her the freedom to express herself authentically without fear of judgment. She doesn't hide behind perfection anymore. She shines through authenticity. She has learned that the bravest thing she can ever do is to be real in her pain, in her joy, and in her growth. Her openness becomes a quiet revolution against a world that tells women to stay composed. And as she embraces her vulnerability, she becomes a living example that there is power in being both soft and strong, both open and wise, both healing and whole. Her presence inspires healing in others, not because she preaches about strength, but because she lives it quietly and consistently when she enters a room. She doesn't demand attention. She carries an energy that speaks before she even says a word. There's something different about her now, something grounded, calm, and deeply comforting. People can feel it. Her eyes hold empathy, her words carry warmth, and her silence has meaning. She no longer carries the restless energy of someone trying to prove her worth. She has learned to be still, to be at peace, and that stillness becomes magnetic. Those who cross her path sense that she has been through storms, yet there's no bitterness in her tone, only wisdom. That alone becomes medicine for others who are still hurting. When a woman heals, her energy shifts in ways that touch lives she doesn't even realize. Her presence becomes a safe space for others to be themselves. People find themselves opening up to her, trusting her, seeking her comfort, not because she offers perfect solutions, but because she listens without judgment. She has known what it feels like to be unheard, unseen, and misunderstood. So she becomes the kind of person who makes others feel seen. Her compassion is not forced. It's born from her own pain. She knows how to hold space for others without trying to fix them, understanding that sometimes presence is more powerful than advice. Her healing gives others permission to begin their own. When people see her living with grace after hardship, they start to believe that maybe healing is possible for them too. She becomes a mirror that reflects not perfection, but possibility. Her resilience whispers to the broken-hearted, "You can make it through this too." Her laughter, once buried beneath pain, now shines as proof that joy can return even after deep sorrow. She doesn't need to tell her story in detail. Her peace tells it for her. Her growth becomes her message, her calm becomes her testimony, and her authenticity becomes her greatest influence. She carries herself differently now. There is patience in her responses, gentleness in her tone, and humility in her victories. She doesn't use her healing as a badge of superiority. She uses it as a tool for understanding. She doesn't look down on those still struggling. She reaches out her hand and says, "Take your time. You'll get there." Because she remembers what it felt like to be at the beginning of the journey, to feel lost, confused, and tired of pretending. And that memory keeps her compassionate. Her empathy is not pity, it's connection. Her presence begins to ripple beyond herself. It changes her home, her relationships, even her community. Her children learn peace instead of tension. Her friends learn patience instead of gossip. Her family learns understanding instead of judgment. She doesn't push these lessons on anyone. They simply absorb them by being around her. She teaches not with words, but with energy, and this influence spreads silently, softly, and deeply. There's a certain light in her that others can't quite describe. It's not loud or dazzling, but steady and warm. It's the light that comes from a soul that has faced darkness and decided to shine anyway. People are drawn to that kind of light because it feels safe, real, and alive. Her journey reminds others that healing isn't about becoming someone new. It's about returning to who you were before the world hurt you. By existing as her healed, whole, authentic self, she becomes a living reminder that brokenness is not the end. It's the beginning of becoming. Her very presence whispers to every wounded soul around her, you too can rise. She no longer seeks revenge, she seeks peace. Once, anger fueled her, anger at the people who hurt her, at the situations that broke her, at the unfairness of it all. She used to replay the past in her mind, imagining what she could have said or done differently. She wanted justice, closure, or maybe just an apology that never came. But healing taught her something deeper, that peace is a far greater victory than revenge. Revenge may satisfy the ego for a moment, but peace nourishes the soul forever. So, she stopped chasing retribution and began chasing serenity. She realized she didn't need to make anyone else feel her pain. She just needed to stop feeling it herself. At first, it wasn't easy to let go. Anger had been her armor for so long. It made her feel protected, powerful even. But over time, she saw that holding on to anger was like drinking poison and expecting others to hurt. It kept her tied to the same pain she wanted freedom from. So she began to release little by little. She didn't forgive instantly or forget overnight. But she decided she didn't want bitterness to be the story of her life. She learned that peace doesn't come from forgetting what happened. It comes from accepting that she cannot control it anymore. She stopped asking, "Why me?" and started saying, "What can this teach me?" That simple shift began to soften her heart. Peace, she discovered, is not a passive state. It's an active choice. It's waking up and deciding not to let the past dictate the mood of the day. It's walking away from arguments that lead nowhere. It's learning to be content with silence when her spirit is weary. It's choosing not to respond to negativity, even when she has every reason to. The healed woman understands that she doesn't need to prove anyone wrong. She only needs to prove to herself that she can rise above it. Every time she responds with calm instead of rage, she wins a battle within. That victory doesn't need to be seen by the world. It's felt deeply in her soul. When she chooses peace, her life begins to change in ways she couldn't have imagined. People who thrive on conflict no longer find a home in her presence. Her boundaries become firmer, her voice becomes softer, and her days become lighter. The constant noise of resentment fades, replaced by quiet gratitude for the present. She begins to see beauty again, in small things, in laughter, in simple mornings. Her heart, once heavy with pain, now feels spacious and open. She no longer needs closure from others because she's found it within herself. There's a calm strength in her now that others notice. It's not the kind of strength that shouts or seeks attention. It's the kind that moves with quiet confidence. When others expect her to be angry or vengeful, she surprises them with grace. When they provoke her, she responds with composure. That doesn't mean she's weak. It means she's wise. She knows that peace is power, and the one who stays centered controls the outcome. The healed woman doesn't let others dictate her emotions anymore. She's mastered the art of inner balance, of responding instead of reacting. And so, her peace becomes her revenge, not in a vengeful sense, but as a silent triumph. The people who once tried to break her see her thriving, glowing, living freely, and that is enough. Her life itself becomes the response they'll never expect. She doesn't need to shout her story. Her serenity speaks for itself. By letting go of anger, she has reclaimed her power. By releasing the desire to hurt back, she has found healing. And in her peace, she proves something extraordinary, that true strength lies not in fighting the darkness, but in choosing not to let it live within her.